Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Wells Fargo Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into, but first, a quick shout out. My friend Dave hit a top 10 on Brandon Wu over the weekend at the Mexico Open at Vedanta. Was spending all of yesterday trying to catch up and did not see that message. So congratulations, Dave, for hitting the top 10 on Brandon Wu this past weekend at the Mexico Open. And don't forget, if you have success in any of your wagering ventures, whether that's outrights or in DFS, let me know either via social media or in chat. Would love to be able to shout out all of the members of the community that have success, as I will do every time I'm notified. But as I mentioned, we have a lot to get into for the Wells Fargo this week, so let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. There are a lot of great tools out there. There's no doubt about that. I simply believe Fantasy National is the best one out there. Go check them out. You'll be grateful. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where I posted some research earlier today around the previous 3 winners of the Wells Fargo when it was held specifically at Quail Hollow. So if you would like to see the summary of my research, go give me a follow over at those two places. I also posted my 3 up, 3 down for baseball content over on Twitter. As I mentioned last night, that would resume today. So if you would like to see my daily DFS baseball selections, give me a follow over at Twitter. The link to my Twitch channel is also below. This is where I do all of my in-depth research. It's much more laid back. I have music going on in the background, and you have unfettered access to any questions that you would like to ask, any statistics you want to see, all of that good stuff. So if you want to see that, give me a follow over there. And then finally, we're live. Chat's open. I want to hear from you all. Did you all check the odds boards today when the odds came out? I certainly fired off a win wager, a couple of top 20s, different types of deals there. So I want to hear from you all if you all fired off any wagers. The pricing has come out as well. What do you think about that? Who are your early choices this week? Who you might be building your lineups around? So jump in chat. Would love the interaction and hear from you all and what you all are thinking and wanting to see tonight. So let's dig into the data for the 2023 Wells Fargo. And we're going to start very, very quickly over at Windfinder, if my camera will focus. Hey, there we go. Didn't have to restart the stream. Sorry about that. Gotta love technology. But anyway, we're going to start here very, very quickly over at Windfinder. Not a lot in terms of wind in the forecast for the tournament. Having said that, there is certainly a lot going on prior to the tournament. So if this wind forecast or this forecast gets pushed back perhaps into Thursday, as you can see, you have some pretty strong gusty winds early on this week down in Charlotte. If this gets pushed back, we will definitely have to adjust. But as of right now, you see Thursday very, very pristine, perhaps a little bit chilly with a high of 66, but pristine, not a lot of wind on Thursday. Friday, much the same. Saturday looks like they could have perhaps a thunder shower maybe, and into Sunday morning. But overall, right now, nothing to be worried about in terms of a AM/PM split or needing to focus on any wind metrics. And of course, we will update this at the beginning of Wednesday evening's DFS Tactics show. But as of right now, no need to factor in wind into our thought process this week. So I'm going to close that out. And we're going to move to Fantasy National, do a few kind of reviews or reminders from last night, and then move on into a lot of new stuff. So, as you can see, I've got this set for the beginning of 2021, and right now I'm looking at difficult rounds to par. So your top players since the beginning of 2021, when a round has been difficult, have been Colin Morikawa, Rory, Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Matt Fitzpatrick, Xander, Sungjae, Justin Thomas, Shane Lowry, and Max Homa. Before I forget, a couple of quick things here. The Mexico Open has been loaded, so I have definitely put that information into my own Microsoft spreadsheets or Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. So those factors and that data has been updated. And I have seen one more field change on top of the three big names that have decided to skip. Again, if you were not here for last night's show or have not seen, the three big names that are not here this week in Charlotte: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, and Hideki Matsuyama. Hideki citing an injury as to his reasoning for not being here. Now, the fourth field change is Brandon Wu. Brandon Wu is not going to be playing this week. He is withdrawn, and Brent Grant has taken his spot in the field. But anyway, there is a look at your top 10 in terms of total performance when a round has been difficult. We also are going to want to look at long courses. Quail Hollow, a par 71, measuring over 7,500 yards. So we apparently we're going to look at some windy. That's not what I meant to click. We're going to want to look at long courses over 7,400. So your top performers since the beginning of 2021 win a round or on courses that are over 7,400 yards. Those players have been Xander, Colin Morikawa, Sam Stevens, Jordan Spieth, Rory, Corey Connors, Chris Kirk, Matt Fitzpatrick, Sungjae, and Keegan Bradley. So there's a look at your top 10 for long courses and for difficult rounds. Let's see, gonna want to do one more thing here. I mentioned last night that I was going to be looking for any information that I could regarding Bermuda versus Poa Trivialis. Was not able to find anything definitive. So again, I'm going to be defaulting to believing that the Bermuda is dominant right now. So if that is indeed incorrect, if I need to be looking at Poa Trivialis, then I will own that next week or update that in my thinking Wednesday evening. But last night and tonight, I'm going to be looking at putting specifically on fast Bermuda greens, as that is typically what is in play here at Quail Hollow. So your top putters since the start of 2021 on fast Bermuda greens have been Sam Burns, Ben Taylor, Chesson Hadley, Brendan Todd, Davis Riley, Ben Griffin, Matt Fitzpatrick, Denny McCarthy, Kevin Tway, and Alex Noren. Now, with all of that out of the way, I'm going to narrow this timeline as soon as I correctly uncheck everything that I'm wanting to. I'm going to bring this into 2023, and we're going to look at the two major ball striking categories: off the tee and approach. So, since the beginning of this calendar year, the top off the tee players in the field this week have been Luke List, Patrick Cantley, Hayden Buckley, Keith Mitchell, Gary Woodland, Cameron Young, Victor Hovland, Terrell Hatton, Cam Davis, Brian Harmon, and Corey Connors. Of those 11, only 2 are top 10 in approach as well. So Gary Woodland and Victor Hovland are your your 2 players that are top 10 in both ball striking categories separately. And I went into a little spiel last night on why I like to look at off the tee and approach separately as opposed to just looking at ball striking. There's no problem at all with looking at ball striking if you want a nice, easy looking summary of the 2 statistics, but I much prefer looking at the 2 separately. So there's your top off the tee players in the same time frame, starting at this calendar year. Your top strokes gained approach players have been Tony Finau, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Ricky Fowler, Wyndham Clark, Max Homa, Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Ben Martin, and Gary Woodland. And I think that is going to do it in terms of the review or so from last night. I'm going to get this prepped for these various page views that we want to look at. I need to reset these timelines because we're going to be looking at quite a few of these metrics, both when a round is difficult and on long courses. So I'm going to set this to long courses to start. We'll be working back and forth between them. But let's go ahead and move straight into some previous leaderboards and get a feel for what we think is going to give us a good idea as to the type of players that are going to succeed here at Quail Hollow, or at least the types of players that have succeeded in years past. And you'll see that I'm starting at 2021. Again, last year's Wells Fargo was played at TPC Potomac while Quail Hollow was being prepared for the President's Cup. So we're going to be looking at 2021, 2019, and 2018. No 2020 Wells Fargo due to 2020 being the horrendous year that it was. All right, so let's take a look at the 2021 Wells Fargo. The last time the Wells Fargo was held at Quail Hollow, its usual spot on the PGA Tour. Now, we're going to look at the top 17 here. Just, again, convenient for ties. You see only 1 player negative and off the tee. They were pretty bad. Emiliano Grillo was pretty bad that week off the tee. But only 1 player negative off the tee, only 1 player negative in approach. Around the green, 3 players negative, but not nearly the high amount of strokes gained. In fact, Tommy Fleetwood is the highest of these top 17 at a 4.2, whereas you have 7.5, 7.4s, some 6s. In the approach, you have 7.5, 7.1, 7s, all of that. Whereas around the green, Brian Harmon 7.8. It must have passed. Oh, he wasn't in the top 17. Piercy is a 4.7, 4.2, 4.1, and then putting 7.3. But then of the players that finished in the top 17, Bryson, Rory, Patrick Reed, Kadira, 7, 6.9, 6.7, 6.5. Putting generally a pretty big deal, especially for the players that are winning this event. But you can see the heavy concentration of players that are not just positive, but pretty significantly positive in relation to the field in the ball striking categories. If we look at 2019, it's going to be much the same. We will look at, look at that, top 17. Again, just convenient for ties. Now, the bottom half of the top 17 in 2019, a little bit more negative in terms of off the tee, but a whole lot of success here in off the tee. And look at your strokes gained approach. Not a single one of the top 17 was negative in terms of strokes gained approach. Around the green, very inconsistent, very hit and miss. 7.7 being the leader in off the tee that year. 8.2, and look at this high level of extreme correlation here. Now, yes, Trey Mullinex, a pretty clunker of a made cut, pretty big clunker of a made cut. Really, all he did was hit his irons well that week. He was slightly under field average off the tee. His short game was pretty poor that week. But you have an 8th, a 4th, a runner-up, a top 30, 2 top 15s, and then more single-digit finishes here in strokes gained approach. Just a big factor here at Quail Hollow. Around the green, you got some decent finishes, but your miscuts are creeping up pretty high, and the total number is not nearly as high as the other two. And then putting, of course, if you are winning the tournament, you are going to be draining a lot of putts. No surprise there, but even so, you've still got quite a few very good finishes here a little further down on the putting leaderboard. And then finally, we'll check 2018, but it is a lot of the same in terms of ball striking. Top 15 just due to ties. Again, not a single player negative in strokes gained approach. You do get a few more negatives in terms of off the tee the further down in the bottom 15, but your elite finishes all still very, very positive in off the tee. Around the green, still pretty inconsistent, I would say. If you sort on these metrics, you've got a miscut from Gary Woodland, but otherwise pretty solid correlation here, although your winner's a little further down. Approach, you got your cut makers. So this is about the lowest correlation I've seen among the 3 years in terms of strokes gained approach. You got some cut makers, but not a lot of your elite finishes other than maybe Paul Casey and Bryson. Around the green, Jason Day was your leader in that category that year, and he was second in putting. So putting just a big factor at Quail Hollow. And that's why we looked at the 3 statistics that we did in the page view, or in the strokes gained page view, the off the tee, the approach, and the putting. Let's go ahead and move to some driving statistics. And talked about last night how fairways might not be something that we want to look at, even though these fairways are difficult to hit. The rough is not too terribly difficult to play out of, so we're going to be focusing on distance. We might want to look at some good drives, and we're definitely going to be looking at some greens. So in 2021's Wells Fargo, again, the top 17, just due to ties, you got quite a bit of distance up here. Now, Abraham Answer was never long when he was on the PGA Tour, but he was pretty darn close to field average. Patrick Reed was not long that week. Kodaira will generally never be long, but look at the names that are in your top 10, maybe even a little bit further down. Rory, your winner, always is going to have an advantage in distance. Keith Mitchell, Victor Hovland, Gary Woodland, Luke List, these guys have distance. Bryson, obviously. Grillo generally has some distance, although he was much more closer to field average that week. Xander can move it quite a bit. So these guys with distance generally have pretty good advantage at Quail Hollow. If we sort on it, again, sorting on the driving distance. We'll just look at the top 6 here. 4 of your top 6 5 of your top 7 in terms of driving distance for the week finished inside the top 10. Keith Mitchell a 3rd, Luke List a 6th, Gary Woodland a top 5. Your winner was second most in distance, and Bryson was top 10. And even the two that weren't top 10s, you had a top 20 and a top 30. So very, very, very correlating statistic here in terms of driving distance. We look at good drives gained. Good drives gained, defined by Fantasy National, is a player has hit the fairway or they have hit the green in regulation if they missed the fairway. And you can see only one player was negative in terms of good drives gained. So if we sort on that statistic, a little bit less in terms of correlating than driving distance, but still pretty darn solid. You have a miscut from Rory Sabatini, but your winner's pretty high up here in terms of good drives. You've got some pretty good finishes, some elite finishes, your runner-up, a top 10, a third, a couple of top 20s in here, but you do have some middling to clunkers mixed in as well. Good evening, P. Glad to see you in chat. Hope you had a good week. How was your Mexico Open? All of that good stuff. I'm glad to be back. As you can probably tell, although it was very pronounced last night, I got quite a bit of sun down in Tennessee, so feel free to insert whatever jokes at my disposal that you would like to, considering that I have a pretty clear tan line of a hat that I was wearing. But good to see you in chat. Thanks for jumping in there. And hopefully you are ready for the Wells Fargo this week. But there's some good drives gained. It's okay in terms of correlation. Certainly something that I'm thinking about using, or at least diving into further. But I'm pretty sure greens are going to be a pretty big deal. And when we sort on that metric, your leader in that metric finished second. Your winner of the tournament finished third in that metric, and they are gaining a whole lot in that specific statistic. Top 10, top 20, a third, another top 20. So greens in regulation, even though these greens are big, greens in regulation are going to be something that we want to focus on because this course is very, very difficult. It's very long, so hitting the green is a big challenge. Hopefully you wore sunscreen so your skin doesn't end up looking like Tom Kite's. I was the king of terrible 6 of 6s at Mexico. Some didn't even cash. Yeah, there were a lot of 6 of 6s that made it through in the DFS contest that I played. And I believe all of my 6 of 6s cashed. But for as correct as I feel I was about last week, certainly the DFS was disappointing. Now, I mentioned last Wednesday I was going to pretty close to full fade Will Gordon. He ended up fading on Sunday, but still was very popular. He made a lot of points. Nikolai Højgaard was very middling. I had, Aaron Rye missed the cut. I mentioned Alex Smalley missed the cut. So, if you were 5 of 6, you really needed to have Finau, Akshay Bhatia, Tosti, who I figured was going to be pretty popular, as I saw a lot of pundits really talk him up last week. So I stayed away. So if you were 5 of 6, you really needed to have that kind of shell of a lineup. The saving grace for me last week is that I hit 2 top 20s, Cameron Champ at 4-1, and Carson Young, who I was very, very high on, even as a 6K play in DFS. I wagered him to top 20. That came in at 7-1, so it was a profitable week, but that was thanks to the wagers, not the DFS. But yeah, so I'm really thinking that greens are going to be a pretty integral factor this week. Not too dissimilar from Vedanta last week. We're definitely going to be looking at distance. Let's move to 2019 and see if perhaps good drives gained is a little bit more correlating from that year. Again, the top 17 just due to ties. Distance, again, a little bit less in terms of the overall numbers or the high numbers that we see here. Although you do see Keith Mitchell in a 108. You have a couple of 79, or like a couple of 70s here, 79, 71. But generally speaking, your upper end success, these guys are having some distance. Max Homa, Justin Rose still moves it, and he's moved it even better in 2019. Sergio, even in his age, he still moves it. Paul Casey was positive. Ricky, Keith Mitchell, Johnny Vegas, Rory, these guys can move the golf ball. So distance is going to be something. Good drives gained, only 3 negative in terms of good drives gained when you sort on it. Kind of what we saw from 2021 in the sense that you have, your cut makers and you have some good finishes, elite finishes here, but you don't have your winner. Joel Damon, a runner-up, Duffner, a T4 is up here, but you surrounded with some good finishes, some middling finishes. If we sort on the distance, okay, quite a bit less correlating than it was in 2021 for sure. And then greens, yeah, you gotta, your first miscut's off, you gotta scroll for it. Runner up, top 20, couple top 15s up here, top 10. So yeah, greens is looking like where we're wanting to focus in the driving tab this week. So I'm going to reset this. We're going to go to birdies and bogeys. But for the players in the field this week, and again, we'll look at this a couple of different ways. Right now, I've got the long course filter on. So your top greens and regulation gained players on long courses since the beginning of 2021. Those players are Corey Connors, Henrik Norlander, Bryce Garnett, Alex Smalley, Ryan Palmer, Colin Morikawa, Shane Lowry, Rory McIlroy, Aaron Rai, and Luke List. So it's good to see Rory there just because he is the top strokes gained total player here at Quail Hollow the past 3 editions. I can't say 3 years, but the past 3 times the Wells Fargo has been at Quail Hollow, he is pretty clearly the strokes gained total leader. And I say it's a good thing to see him because we're trying to figure out which filter, whether it's the long course or it's the difficult to par, that we want to focus on for these various statistics that we want to look at. So there's your top greens and regulation gained players on long courses. Absolutely need to look at some driving distance as well. So your top driving distance players when a course is long: Rory McIlroy, Cameron Champ, Wyndham Clark, Gary Woodland, Cam Young, Ryan Brim, Will Gordon, Trey Mullinax, Luke List, and Matty Schmid. And as I'm thinking about this and giving you all this information, in the back of my mind I'm trying to think, if I'm making my mixed condition model now, what would I gravitate towards or whatnot, and seeing Rory up here, Wyndham Clark, Gary Woodland. Woodland has played this event fairly well. Trey Mullinax, it's not been inspiring finishes, but he's made the cut a couple of times here. Adam Scott has performed okay here. Sam Burns. So driving distance on long courses seems to make a lot of sense as a match between metric and filter. Now, if we remove the long course and we look at difficult, when a round is difficult, your top driving distance players in those situations: Rory McIlroy, Wyndham Clark, Cameron Young, Cameron Champ, Luke List, Will Gordon, Gary Woodland, Ryan Brim, Taylor Pendrith, and Trey Mullinax. So quite literally 90% of the same names in different order. However, I still feel like I like the I feel as if the long course filter is more appropriate for driving distance than the difficult to par, because the players know that it'll be okay if they go into the rough. It's not necessarily a full shot penalty. The rough is kept at average length. The course is just flat out long. That's what makes it so difficult. But I still think it's worthy to look at driving distance when a course is difficult. But what I'm really going to be looking at, I think, let's take a look at greens when a round is difficult. So your top players in that sense, meaning your top greens in regulation gained performers when a round is difficult. Since the start of 2021, Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Alex Smalley, Rory, Patrick Cantlay, Shane Lowry, Xander, Russell Knox, Luke List, and Will Gordon. So already a few of these names seem to be popping up on several of these metrics and filters. Obviously Rory, who's the 2021 champion at Wells Fargo, the last champion of the Wells Fargo when it was held at Quail Hollow. Will Gordon's been up here quite a bit. Luke List has been up here quite a bit. Colin Morikawa is always going to be up there when scoring is difficult. So again, I'm thinking that driving distance when it's on long courses. I'm thinking greens when it's difficult. And something else that we're definitely going to want to look at, let's take a look at scrambling. We can look at this in a couple of different ways, although I generally look at scrambling when it's difficult as kind of a parallel with bogey avoidance. If pars are good scores, I want to see who is able to scramble, and those are generally done on difficult courses. So your top scramblers when a round is difficult since the start of 2021: Sungjae, Denny McCarthy, Robert Streb, Tommy Fleetwood, Justin Thomas, Bryce Garnett, Ben On, Andrew Putnam, Jason Day, and Brian Harmon. So Jason Day, your champion in 2018 at Quail Hollow. Let's see, anybody else here that kind of jumps off at me? Not really. You got a lot of your good putters, which that coincides quite a lot with scrambling. I guess it probably wouldn't hurt to look at scrambling on long courses, but again, I'm leaning towards scrambling when it's difficult. But your top scramblers on long courses in that same time frame: Brendan Todd, Taylor Montgomery, Matt Kuchar, Dylan Fratelli, Peter Bonotti, Jordan Spieth, Patrick Rogers, Matt Fitzpatrick, Jimmy Walker, and Rory McIlroy. So quite a different list of names there in terms of scrambling on long courses versus scrambling when it's difficult. And I'm liking the scrambling when it's difficult more so than the scrambling when it's long. But there is that list, the scrambling when it's long for you. All right, that's going to cover it for the driving tab. We might look at good drives gained, perhaps, but I'm still thinking it's driving distance, it's greens regulation, and scrambling gain. Perhaps maybe some sand saves, maybe. I'll have to really dig into that tomorrow. But let's look at some of these scoring metrics. And last night in Microsoft Excel, we saw that the bogey avoidance took a pretty heavy precedent over the birdies gained for the players who have the elite finishes here. So from 2021, again, Rory, your winner, doubled the bogey avoidance than he did the birdies. More bogeys, more bogey avoidance, more bogey avoidance, bogey avoidance, bogey avoidance. So of your top fives, 4 of the top 5, gosh dang it, also need to get Woodland. 4 of your top 5 were more adept at avoiding bogeys in 2021. Let's see. And of your top 10, you've got 1, 2, 3. So it looks like 7 or 8. 7. 7 of your top 10 were more in the bogey avoidance. From 2021, we'll move to 2019, birdies and bogeys. Max Homa had quite a few birdies, sure, but he was still more in the bogey avoidance. Bogey avoidance, bogey avoidance. Sergio birdies, Paul Casey bogeys, bogey avoidance, bogey avoidance, bogey avoidance, bogey avoidance. So 2 straight years there of bogey avoidance taking precedent over the birdies gained. And in fact, in 2019, your winner led in bogey avoidance. Probably led in birdies. Oh, he was second in birdies. Okay. But there's quite a few double-digit numbers here and a couple in the 30s. Whereas in the bogey avoidance, yeah, Jimmy Walker at 45th, but nowhere near the level of 31sts and whatnot that you had from the birdies. Birdies gained, I should say. And we'll do that for the 2021 since I forgot to do that as well. So sorting on the birdies gained, again, good correlation. Absolutely, you got to make birdies to rise on the leaderboard, but you got 37ths and 43rds, like these middling finishes up here for these birdies gained, whereas the bogey avoidance, fair enough, Rob Oppenheim missed the cut with a solid performance in bogey avoidance. He just didn't make a birdie seemingly all week. But above Rob Oppenheim, you have nothing worse than a T18. So to me, that seems pretty clear that we're going to want to look at bogey avoidance this week. I'll get this prepped for proximity, but let's go ahead and move to birdies and bogeys, and we'll first look at it on long courses, but whenever possible, I like to match a scoring metric like birdies gained, bogey avoidance, etc., with a scoring filter like difficult to par. So I'm 95% sure I'm going to be using bogey avoidance when it's difficult, but there's no harm in looking at bogey avoidance when on long courses either. On long courses, your top bogey avoiders since 2021 have been Matt Fitzpatrick, Rory, Bryce Garnett, Gary Woodland, Shane Lowry, Jordan Spieth, Matt Kuchar, Brendan Todd, Sungjae, and Xander. Now something else too, and I went and looked at the Mexico Open statistics, or at least gathered them and brought them into Microsoft Excel and whatnot. I mentioned how 5% of my mixed condition model last week I was using opportunities gained, kind of a dart throw, if you will, or 5% that was kind of a tangent. And I kind of want to do the same this week, and I might not include it in the final mixed condition model, but I do think there is some value in looking at who gives themselves opportunities either on long courses or when it's difficult. And I can see the merits to both of the filters, long and difficult. I'm not sure if I'm going to include it in the final mixed condition model, but I still want to at least look at it. So, your top players at giving themselves opportunities on long courses since the start of 2021. Corey Connors, Justin Thomas, Ryan Palmer, Cam Young, Chris Kirk, Webb Simpson, Victor Hovland, Max Homa, Cam Davis, and Michael Thompson. So you see Webb Simpson giving himself opportunities. He's played Quail Hollow very well, even though he lacks a lot of distance. So he's doing something correct here. That could be a part of it. Giving himself opportunities on these long courses. Let's go ahead and move to when a round is difficult. We'll take a look at opportunities first. So your top players at giving themselves opportunities when a round is difficult since the start of 2021. Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Rory, Xander, Cam Davis, Davis Riley, Corey Connors, Cam Young, Luke List, and Ches Reavie. Ches Reavie is interesting because he does not have a lot of length at all, and yet he's given himself plenty of opportunities when it's difficult. Okay, but otherwise, pretty similar in terms of the names from the top 10 opportunity players when it's long. And if we go to bogey avoidance, when a round is difficult, those top 10, or that top 10 is Colin Morikawa, Sung Jae, Shane Lowry, Rory, Matt Fitzpatrick, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Alex Smalley, and Tommy Fleetwood. So quite a bit of overlap there. Again, I'm very, very confident I'll be using bogey avoidance when a round is difficult. I could see perhaps adding some opportunities. It would be no more than 5%, but I can see the merits to it for sure. But I'm definitely looking at bogey avoidance when it's difficult. So these players will definitely be rising in my rankings, all other things equal, as I'm going to have quite an emphasis on bogey avoidance this week. All right, let's move to proximity. And proximity is interesting, especially here at Quail Hollow. Now, yes, the majority of approach shots come from 200 plus. This is just a long course. But we saw last night how there was a little bit of mixed success and mixed data in Microsoft Excel. And we especially saw it last week at Vedanta leading into the tournament, how the data said it was important, the leaderboards perhaps not so much. So be curious to see what's going on with the proximities here. So in 2021, looking at, again, just the top 17, you see Rory, your champion, was terrible from that length. Just atrocious. And it didn't look like there was much correlation here at all in terms of the 200 plus. Really not a whole lot of correlation in proximity really at all. If we sort on it, you got a miscut up here, but you have a couple of top 5s, a couple of top 20s, a top 15. I mean, it's really tough as a statistician to say this is, strong correlation. Now, your winner is fairly high up here, sure, in total procs, but by no means is this a direct or even strong correlation. If we look at 200 plus, again, you've got a set of cut makers, but you got quite a bit of miscuts up here too. So nothing really stands out in terms of proximity and importance from 2021. Looking at 2019 proximity. Okay, so this is a little bit stronger. Again, the top 17, everybody in the top 12 was positive in total procs. That's at least something. The 200 plus, again, just kind of hit and miss, it looks like. Your total procs performers, you have a couple of pretty high missed cuts, but you also have a 4th, a 2nd, 4th and an 8th, a little bit lower. So moderately strong, as I would say. Moderately strong. The 200 plus. Okay, now look at this. Once you are above the missed cuts here, you've got a top 10, a top 5, a top 5. Your winner is up here in 200 plus. Top 20. A few middling finishes, sure. So 2019, the 200 plus was certainly pretty strong in terms of correlation. But in 2021, it wasn't. So that's why I always have an issue with proximity as a statistician. Top 15 from 2018. Again, there's just a lot of red here in 200 plus procs. You've got a few elite finishes, and clunkers have made cuts. Again, you got quite a few missed cuts, very high on the 200 plus, but I mean, a fourth, a second, and a fifth in your top four in 200 plus. So what I think this leads to is that if there is a range that matters, it is the 200 plus. Just not sure it does. But we'll take a look at it. And we're going to remove the filters. We'll bring this into the beginning of this calendar year. If there is a range, I think it's the 200 plus. So your top players in proximity from 200 plus yards since the beginning of 2023: Patrick Cantlay, Adam Svensson, Gary Woodland, Augusto Nunez, Austin Cook, Robbie Shelton, Michael Thompson, Kirk Kitayama, Tony Finau, and Ben Taylor. Maybe total procs can be argued as well. So your top total procs performers this calendar year: Victor Hovland, Nate Lashley, Tony Finau, Justin Suh, Davis Riley, Ryan Armour, Lucas Glover, Ches Reavie, Gary Woodland, and Max Homa. So again, proximity, if there is a specific range, it's the 200 plus. How much is it going to be a factor? Seems pretty inconsistent in terms of its correlation to high leaderboard success. The same with proximity. All right, par threes we saw in Microsoft Excel last night that they really weren't all that important. I mean, look here in 2021. Your highest looks to be a 5. I do see a 6 a little bit further down. That's off your screen. You have a 7 from Spawn. But, I mean, of your players that played Quail Hollow the best, there's not a lot here in terms of par 3s. You got your cut makers, but Rory was just, plus 1. Of the specific ranges, you got a 2.4, a 2.8, 2.6, 2.4. So no range really looks like it stands out. And the par 3s don't look all that important at all. They weren't in 2021, 2019. Yeah, just a 2.2. Now Joel Damon played the par 3s, fairly well. So it was a little bit more correlating in 2019, but you still had some miscuts extremely high in par 3 performance. Of your top 17, only 2 were negative. Okay, if there's a range, 2.1. Okay, all of those players made the cut. That's why there was a par 3. So this range doesn't matter because the only time a par 3 measured from 150 to 175 is, after the cut was made. So this range doesn't matter in 2019 at least. 3.8, okay-ish. 2.7, not really. 2.7 and even lower there. So it doesn't look like there's a specific range. Maybe 5% in the par 3s. It just doesn't look all that important. It really doesn't look all that important. So we'll go to 2021. We'll set this up for the par 4s. However, your top par 3 total performers in the field this week, and this will be at most 5% in the mixed condition model. Your top par 3 performers: Ricky Fowler, Sam Burns, Siwoo Kim, Sam Ryder, Sung Jae, Jason Day, Max Homa, Ben Taylor, Stefan Jaeger, and Justin Suh. Now, having said that, Jason Day and Max Homa are 2 of the 3 champions here at Quail Hollow. So perhaps they do need to be factored in. I just don't see a whole lot of importance to them. Par 4s. Extremely important, I'll tell you that right now. And it's going to be the 450 to 5. And I've been rambling for quite a bit, so let's get through these. You can see when sorted on the par 4s, I mean, even down to the bottom of your screen here, nobody is outside a T26. That is massive amounts of correlation. 400 to 450. Little bit less correlation, but not by much, because you got second, first, ninth, top 20, top 30, middling, 5th, 6th, 14th, 6th, 3rd. Yeah, so 400 to 450, extremely, extremely, extremely important, along with just the par 4s in general. I'll show you 2019. It's going to be more of the same. Sorted on the par 4s, 1st, 4th, 3rd, 8th, and then a couple of top 15s, a top 25, 400 to 450, 450 to 5, 6.3. A little bit less. You have a couple of, or 3 double-digit finishes, 18th, 13th, 13th, and then top 10, winner, 3rd. Looks like the 400 to 450 I actually had quite a bit in 2019 as well. So, but certainly the 450 to 5 is extremely important as well in that year. Did I just hit 2022? I did. You dumbass. All right. So, of the players in the field this week, your top par 4 performers: Chris Kirk, Jason Day, Tony Finau, Patrick Cantlay, Taylor Moore, Akshay Bhatia, Max Homa, Jordan Spieth, Ben Martin, Xander, and Colin Morikawa. Of the specific length here at Quail Hollow, your top 10: Patrick Cantlay, Sam Ryder, Max Homa, Victor Hovland, Justin Thomas, Hayden Buckley, Carson Young, Siwoo Kim, Chris Kirk, and Matt Fitzpatrick. So we'll take a closer look in Microsoft Excel to see how much 450 to 5 is of the par 4s. We might just be looking at the 450 to 5s. Maybe. Although there are still 5 other par 4s that measure outside of this on the scorecard as well. Very quickly, par 5s. For your elite finishers, wasn't really all that important. You see a 2.1 from Rory. A little bit further down is where you get some of these bigger numbers, 7.1, 5.1, all that stuff. But not, I mean, you got a good amount of success here, but it's not in a strong or direct correlation. A 3.1, a 5.5, and a 2.5. So nothing jumping off the charts there in terms of correlation. Par 5s in 2019. A little bit strong. Oh, quite a bit stronger. Look at that. 18th, 1st, 3rd, 4th, 8th. And then 2nd down here. All right. 4.3. 1.6 and a lot of miscuts there. 1.7, a lot of miscuts. Okay. Again, we'll go to Microsoft Excel and see if any specific range is making up quite a bit or a majority of the strokes gained total. But for right now, your total or your top total par 5 performers since the start of this calendar year: Sungjae, Patrick Cantlay, Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, Xander, Jordan Spieth, Wyndham Clark, Nate Lashley, Colin Morikawa, and Justin Thomas. All right, I've been rambling for quite a while now, so let me reset this back to strokes gained just in case we want to take a look at a few players. But let's move to Microsoft Excel, and the one difference tonight than most other weeks is since the 2022 Wells Fargo was not at Quail Hollow, I decided not to bring up last year's mixed condition model. It just wouldn't apply. We weren't at Quail Hollow last year, so just nothing to look at in that regard. So instead, let's take a look at some of the detail. We went through and compared Quail Hollow to all of the other full field courses. Let's look at the detail and see if we can discern perhaps where some of the par 3s, 4s, and 5s if there's a dominant length or bucket, if you will. But let's take a look at some of the detail here. Let's see, off the tee, extremely important. We had perhaps an outlier of a year on approach, but still pretty darn important. And look here, last year putting was not all that important, and the first 2 years, or at least 2018 and 2019, they were, or putting was. So probably more than likely we're going to want to put some emphasis on putting this week. Driving distance, yeah, big factor in 2021. Yeah, greens and regulation, pretty high outlier, but then again a pretty low outlier. So probably right about in here, 3.8 or so. There's the raw numbers in terms of bogeys and birdies. Just a huge number in the bogey avoidance, even in terms of the raw number and in terms of the percentage against other courses. So pretty clear bogey avoidance is where we're going to be looking at. All right, this is where I was wanting to go with this. Let's see if we can perhaps discern if there is a dominant length of par 3s, 4s, and 5s. So par 3s, we've got a 1.3 in total. The highest is a 0.46, so not really. Looks like if we do anything with par 3s, it'll be just total par 3s, and look at that. That's a pretty massive high outlier from 2019. So very well could be that par 3s are not included at all in the mixed condition model, and if they are, it looks like it's about 5%. And there is a par 3 usually that measures to each length at Quail Hollow, so nothing to do with an individual length of par 3. Par 4s, we've got about a 5 here, which is one of the higher numbers. It's not the highest. It's one of the higher numbers for a course, and 2.61. So more than half of the par 4 strokes gained are from 450 to 5. So that leads me to think that we definitely need to single out this range. How much we put into this range versus all of the par 4s, certainly debatable. You see the past 2 times we've been at Quail Hollow, there hasn't been a 350 to 4 par 4. There are 2 very short par 4s, so we don't want to exclude them. So that's why we need to have a percentage in strokes gained total par 4. But we're definitely going to be singling out the 450 to 5s. Absolutely. Strokes gained par 5. We got a 1.5, and these are pretty darn even. Now that's a massively low outlier. But, well, if we remove that, I mean, it's about the same as the others. So, looks like we're just looking at par 5s. Okay, so it looks like we're just looking at par 5s in total. And then proximity, decently sized number there, but again, another big outlier in 2019 from the 200 plus. So if we remove that and compare it, after removing the high outlier, it's actually less or below full field course average. So not sure I'm going to have much in proximity this week. We might be looking at, just some par 5, a whole lot in the 450 to 5 par 4s, driving distance, greens and regulation. We definitely don't want to ignore putting, seeing this low outlier here. Very big emphasis on ball striking, of course. Probably don't want to ignore scrambling either. Probably going to have some scrambling in there. But there's a look at the raw data for Quail Hollow. We'll end off the show tonight going to the early look file. I'm not going to filter anybody out since the most events that anyone has is 3. So instead, let's just take a look at let's sort some of these metrics that we feel might have or we think are going to be very important at Quail Hollow. So let's start with off the tee. Your top off the tee players the past 5 years at Quail Hollow, which would be 3 events, 2018, 2019, 2021, but just the past 5 years. Keith Mitchell, who's 3 for 3 with an average finish of a top 15. Luke List is 3 for 3, average finish inside the top 30. Gary Woodland, 1 for 2. Look at that, Nick Watney. He's 2 for 2 here. Average finish inside the top 20. Of course, Rory's your best, 3 for 3. Average finish inside the top 10. Ricky Fowler's 2 for 3 here. JT's 2 for 2. Streelman's not been terrible. Joel Damon, 3 for 3. Average finish of a 12th. So those are your top off the tee performers the past 5 years here at Quail Hollow. Definitely want to look at strokes gained approach as well. So let's do that. Your top strokes gained approach players. Russell Knox, it's only 1 year. Look there, there's Rory. Corey Connors is 2 for 2. Not inspiring finishes, but 2 for 2. Griot's 2 for 2 with an average finish of a 12th. Interesting to see Jason Duffner 3 for 3 here. Joel Damon again. There's Keith Mitchell. Kevin Streelman again. 2 for 3. His average finish is pretty low, but still 2 for 3. 2019 champ Max Homa. Stuart Sink. Shane Lowry 2 for 2, although an average finish of 50th. There's Nick Watney again. Webb. JT. They're averaging more than 2 strokes gained in approach per year. Let's look at putting as well. I'm not going to go through every single statistic, but I have a strong feeling that these 3 are going to make up a decent portion of my mixed condition model come Wednesday. So your top putters in the past 5 years at Quail Hollow: Brendan Todd, it's only been 1 year or 1 time. Martin Laird 1 time. Patrick Rogers 2 for 2. Harris English 2 for 2. Max Homa, although we saw that he was a 9.9 the year that he won, so he was probably very, very bad the year that he missed the cut. There's Nick Watney again. Terrell Hatton only 1 time. Burns is only 1 time. Andrew Putnam 2 for 2. Not really all that inspiring finishes. J-Day, your champion in 2018. Griot, Joel Damon. Brian Harmon 3 for 3 here. All right, so there's your top putters at Quail Hollow. I'm going to skip driving distance, although I think it's a very big factor. Just trying to save some time. Let's go to greens. I do want to look at some greens in regulation. So your top greens in regulation gained players. Look here, like Nick Watney, Keith Mitchell, Rory, Connors, Molinari, although he's not had the success that these others have had. Griot, C.T. Pan, 2 for 2. Joel Damon, Jason Duffner, Fowler, Reevey, Webb, Luke List. This is going to be probably the biggest part of my mixed condition model, or some of it. Greens and regulation, as it's a big deal here at Quail Hollow. Take a look at bogey avoidance. Bogey's avoided. Nick Watney again, Rory, Ricky, Luke List, Keith Mitchell, Griot, C.T. Pan's been up here now a couple of times. There's Webb again, Joel Damon, Jason Duffner, J-Day, Brian Harmon, Peter Malnati, Matt Wallace is only 1 time, but he did finish 6th. Keegan's 2 for 3 here, JT, Gary Woodland. All right. I'm going to skip the 3s. We'll look at, let's just go ahead and skip the 4s as well. We'll go straight to the par 4s, 450 to 5. again, these same players, Nick Watney, Rory, CT Pan, Emiliano Grillo. So we're seeing the stats or the metrics that are the most important seemingly for Quail Hollow. We're starting to identify the consistency there among the players. No, I was going to say Will Gordon, but no. Justin Thomas, Joel Damon again. Putnam 2 for 2, although not very inspiring finishes, but he is 2 for 2. Ricky Fowler, Kevin Streelman, Webb Simpson, Luke List, Seamus Power 3 for 3. That might be the first time we've seen him fairly high up here, just off your screen. There you go. Seamus Power 3 for 3. Last one, we'll take a look at 200 plus procs, since it is the range that matters the most, and the one I will use if I end up using a specific range of proximity. Number 1, Webb Simpson, Jason Duffner. And it's surprising to see JT Poston. He's not had much success here at all, but he's been very good at 200 plus. Brian Harmon, Nick Watney, Homa, JT, Hovland, Brendan Todd, Fratelli a little bit less of an extent. Substraka, not crazy amounts of success. Cameron Davis, not crazy amounts of success. Corey Connors. Okay. That's going to do it for the Data Dive show tonight. I will resort this on best average finish for you all. But as I mentioned, that's going to do it for the Data Dive show tonight. Thanks, P, for jumping into chat. Always appreciated. You always tune in and jump into chat when you're able to. Very grateful for that. Thanks. And thanks to everyone else out there who watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, commenting. It's always appreciated. I love being able to take a deep analytical look into sports and to try to win some money in the process. In the comments, let me know what kind of filters you're thinking about this week for Quail Hollow. Do you think you want to focus on long courses? Do you think it's better to focus on difficult? Who are some of your wagers that you have made? Who are some players that you have singled out to be part of your core for DFS? Put that in the comments, and also reach out to me on social media if you have any questions. For all of the wagers that you have made this week for the Wells Fargo, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Wells Fargo, until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.